So hi everybody, thanks for coming. Day 4, losing my voice a little bit. But, and I also want to thank iPres and all of you for coming and talking about this smaller sliver of the field, digital video, and giving the space to participate here in this conference. I'm Sanchez. I've been at the Smithsonian for about 10 years, working with digital assets, learning a lot. And also want to say that my theme for the presentation is this year's 2022 Pantone's Color, Very Perry. Okay. So as a trained AV archivist and digital preservation specialist, I know the urgency of tackling the transfer of our analog collections, but I do want to talk about a different issue today, specifically rooted in today's digital workflows, the maintenance of born digital camera original video formats. I'll talk a little bit technically and show you some examples, but it's also like a story of why this is important. And sort of posit that a lot of times that we might want to consider intentional, irreversible change to our sort of master formats to stabilize them for future access. I also want to describe the slides in the deck going forward. So this is Charlie Weber, who is a video producer at the Smithsonian Folklife Center, shooting the Folklife Festival, I think, in 2017. So a little bit of context. The Smithsonian Institution was founded in 1846, and we have 21 museums, including the American History Museum and the Natural History Museum, science museums, art museums, the National Zoo. And so this is an image of the castle with a lot of collaged images on top from all of the different units, so it's a really big place. And full of digital objects that come from archivists and conservators and collection managers, and also advancement, communication, and video production professionals. So lots of different skill sets too, lots of different kind of technical approaches. Everyone produces video. Produced video gets created by staff and contractors to document artists, events and activities, collection documentation, panda videos, things like that, communities that come together at the American Indian Museum to talk about objects. So really a lot of stuff that then becomes part of our collections. So we do have a lot of produced video that's very important and enriches our collections. So that's why this is like I think a very important topic for us. And of course, they are created by a range of technical capabilities and staff with lots of different kinds of products. So the Smithsonian centralizes digital collection asset and storage with an enterprise digital asset management system, which is where I sit. I think I'm a little unique that we don't have like a digital preservation system. We have a DAMS that we've kicked preservation into over the years with lots of microservices and policies and audits and things like that. And it's very access-oriented, so I have 1,000 users at various places, 100 different collection holders who all need to access it. And 3 environments, 30 million assets. It's a big place, right? So scale is a big issue that we have. Maybe our largest challenge. And we're part of this larger digital ecosystem that really prioritizes access internally and then externally as appropriate. So when I think about like the challenges I'm having with these complex objects and the various tiers that we're having and the different kinds of formats that I'm seeing, I have to make kind of those larger guidelines and best practices together with my community. And of course, I love wigs, so these are hats, but we wear many different kinds of wigs. This is an image from the Cooper Hewitt's Design Museum collection in New York. And we do customer support and system admin, but also I support digital video and audio and digital preservation practices and initiatives. And that means that I have 2 thank you slides, because like everybody here like let me follow them around and play with their cameras and ask them lots and lots of questions for this initiative that's been happening, this research over the last few years. So, but what we are encountering is that work with all these stakeholders has shifted. So at first when I started, I was seeing like ProRes files, like all ProRes, which is a proprietary but very ubiquitous, high-quality editing master format, owned by Apple, but everywhere. It's great, right? But really the workflow would be that producers would, plug their camera into their machines and open their editing suite and transcode off card. So they would make ProRes master files and reformat their cards. And this took a long time, right? It takes a long time to reformat and transcode your files, but then it made editing easier for them in these editing suites. So, but this affects us, right? So we see a lot of ProRes from this time until about 2015, Smithsonian rapidly shifts to Adobe, and Premiere starts to support camera original formats. Not as easy to edit, but saving time. So we're starting to see now, instead of ProRes edit masters, lots and lots of different camera original formats when raw footage needs to be kept. So now we're seeing a lot of different kinds of formats enter the archive. Okay, so we had a lot of questions. As a result, in these shifting practices, we surveyed the video production practices at the Smithsonian. We had all these chats, these like qualitative, chats with video producers. There's a Google Doc. There's like links to all these documents in the paper, and I can share any of it with you. And we learned that we had about 16 participants from 10 museums and to discuss their current practices, and overall, mostly, they said that they maintain a variety of camera original file formats as their kind of raw masters, and they export low resolution derivative edit masters for delivery. So this is highly concerning. And we see that the trends in the cameras and tools are quite consistent, at least among our community. So I thought, okay, so maybe I'm not going to deal with an overwhelming amount of formats, and we can start to really look at a handful. My colleague Taylor McBride and I began a crowdsourced project to inventory and research like a dozen or so formats that we encountered at the Smithsonian and connect them to cameras, encouraging shared documentation through open tools. We have a Google Sheet that we shared at EMEA, and it's open to if you want to contribute to it. Because I know that it's not comprehensive. I'm not going to encounter all the formats from these time periods. And then we conducted a technical analysis of the repository. Of course, out of 30 million files, we have 80,000 video files now. The scale of video is very different. But it has doubled over the last 4 years. So we are ingesting more and more and seeing an increase from QuickTime to like MXF formats. So we're seeing a trend here of what we're acquiring. Okay, so, and then we've created this DAMS file format guide. It's very an internal audience, but we made it public. So there's a public version out there of like what we recommend for certain formats, whether to keep them as is or to migrate them to another format. So what am I talking about here when I'm talking about camera original formats? Try to put my head together around this of the different kinds of formats. I'm an archivist, so I'm like categorizing. And I came up with 3 kind of main categories of formats that we're finding. And then all of a sudden I started to see, like, of course, how they're connected to certain time periods. And the first one I'll talk about the most here, files that are dependent on their package structure. So we have AVCHD. Sometimes I call this talk, I hate AVCHD, which I'll talk about a bit more, but P2 also, which is very interesting. Audio and video streams are actually kept in separate subdirectories in the package, and then the editing suite can put them back together and play it for you, but oh my God, if you're gonna save that package, you've really gotta keep that package together or else you won't be able to maintain those files. And then, of course, we have media files inside package structure. Oh, so this time period, I think P2 and AVCHD are like early 2000s, 2000, I can't remember, where are my notes, 2004, 2006. Media files inside of the package structure, there's a typo there, sorry. We have like Canon C300, XAVC, which comes out of Panasonic cameras. Now we're getting like 4K with this. So these are like more recent formats here, 2017, 2016. But we're starting to see more of a flattening here. We have XML files and CIF files, camera files inside these structures with the formats themselves, the MXF. They're just kind of split up, right? It's into spanned clips. And then the third one that I didn't even put a screenshot to down here at the bottom, sorry, but like proprietary inaccessible formats like RED, a lot of high-end production formats that you need specific, usually purchased software in order to access it. So it's just largely not a format that we're going to keep. We're going to migrate those. Okay, AVCHD, talk about that for a little bit in this first grouping here, right? So we have AVCHD, what it does is that it's only openable by a Mac OS. And so this one example we have on a PC, or if you open the structure in Mac and like open the enclosed structure, you can see like 30 AVC files wrapped in MTS. AVCHD actually splits the clips up because of limitations on the storage at the time, but you get like 2 gigabyte clips here, but they actually equate to 5 clips, right? So you have 30 files and 5 clips. So I'm sort of thinking about a strategy for how to take care of these files in these packaged structures. We could keep them as is, right? Or we could just totally migrate them to evergreen formats like ProRes. I don't want to do that. Put something, else, or AVC, wrapped in MXF, like one big file or 5 files. Or we can look at this and think, this is really good. This is really good AVC structure. The audio's great in this proprietary MTS that we need to get rid of. But we also need to put the clips back together, right? And so it's not really migrating. We need like a word for like despanning. If anybody can come up with a despanning word. Like it's not really concatenating either, right? We're not putting them all together. We have to like make these back into 5 clips, which we can do right now with, I used to use a tool called Edit Ready. And it would do that, but then it would strip out all the original preservation metadata. You can do it with Final Cut now. They put number signs in their file names. Yeah, lots of problems. Anyway, we don't have like the right tools. We don't have the right language for this to actually kind of think about the dependencies, but also stabilize the files without having to do either keep them as is forever in their package structure or migrate them to an evergreen format. This is sort of what I'm arguing for here. We have that other example here in the second example, XAVC, that just has these files that we can concatenate together and pull out some of the metadata from the XML and largely just pull them out of this structure and get rid of the rest. I hesitate after Tyler's presentation to say, like, throw that stuff away. But I want to. Canon, the same kind of thing. I think I am running out of time. Okay, so we look at this FADGI guide, which I was on the committee here to help write this too, but thinking about things that we're talking about in terms of archivists for key aspects to consider, documenting original order, retaining original file when transcoding, retaining all the data from the original files, if changing them. So I'm actually talking about like doing processes here where we don't do any of this, or we have to rethink what original order is, right? If we're despanning, is that the original order, right? What do these archival concepts mean for us in these complex objects that we want to stabilize? And I don't know yet. And we're definitely, I should say this out loud, we're definitely like not keeping the original structure if we're migrating to new formats or rewrapping or concatenating, because we'll have like 5 terabytes, and it's just not the scale itself is just not, it's not responsible to really think about doubling that every year. So we have a lot of things to confront, and we're still in the process of figuring it out. How are we doing this? We're building shared languages with producers. We do not speak the same language. They say, I shoot in GoPro, and I say, oh, you're AVC HD, you know? And they're like, what? So I think understanding the production workflows and following them around and being like, but what do you do? Like, how do you reformat your camera, you know? To try to understand more of the beginning of their workflow, because we're very close to it now. And then thinking about risk tolerance in terms of codecs and formats and all the things we think about, but then also the structure. Sometimes the structure is actually too risky for me to consider keeping. Or it's too dependent on different operating systems that I'm just worried about the future, right? So making choices around that, especially if we're thinking about our access-oriented approach. Remembering our archival practice, so always talking to people about selection and prioritization. Just because they can shoot 10 terabytes doesn't mean they should keep it all. That's a big conversation. And then embracing this kind of new archival perspective of making changes and being okay with those, trying to come up with good QC that's not so manual. Just, we really need more and more of this work, I think, happening. And so that's where I end here in asking for, like, if you are working in this area, if you want to contribute to the Google Sheet of file formats, we're just looking, you know, we probably need like a media history of like different formats and thinking about the dependencies they have over time because of the technology limitations. And this is my team. Everybody helped on all of this for a few years. So thank you. Sorry it took so much time.
Okay, that was really great, Crystal. So I muted this panel session, but I don't think we're going to have it. I think we've made really good use of the time. And so if people have got questions for Crystal now, that'd be really good to hear. Okay. We've got to do one for the online community, so go ahead, Sybil.
Thank you. In your clips example, what is the atomic level of the object that you're actually interested in? Is it the clip or the collection of clips? And as a follow-up, can a single underlying MTS file contain footage from multiple clips? And that's from Jack O'Sullivan from Preservica.
Yeah, the AVCHD package is I'm very intimately familiar with. It has, so the clips themselves, I think, are the objects, right? And we want to despan them. It's, you know, that's how we want to, that's how they're shot. That's how we want to enjoy and appreciate them and access them. But there are all these individual MTS files that gets, they call it spanning, like they get split into 2 gigabyte chunks, right? So that's really what the files are, right? You're going to wrap that up and put it into a repository. You're getting MTS files. But I don't think that's good enough. So I don't know, the objects themselves, I think, are the 5 clips.
Okay, we've got a question from the audience.
Hey, Crystal. Great presentation. Very stress-inducing. My question is about the slide that you had, which displayed various formats, the P2 and the AV. Yeah, this one. So the one that you did, the one that you didn't include, number 3, the proprietary inaccessible formats. Could you talk just a little bit about what your policy is with respect to those? You mentioned RED as an example, and that it requires proprietary RED software to transcode those in the first place to a different format. Does that mean you have a copy of this software yourselves, or you ask the producers to do that on their end? Or like, what does that workflow look like, and what do those policies look like?
Thanks for asking me that. I forgot to talk about those. We do not take them, right? So if you want to give them to us to store and provide access through our systems, you have to change them. And so we have those conversations with producers. I am happy to help. We have some solutions, but usually when these relationships I'm making with the producers too, I think is what I'm talking about, like the archive being so close to the production workflow, almost inside it, that they understand now, and they are turning them into other formats, largely ProRes. I like ProRes. This is not I don't like ProRes talk.
Yeah, thank you so much for that talk. So many questions I've got, so many things to talk about. I'll probably just come and see you afterwards or something. My background's in audiovisual, and I spent a long time working on archiving all this sort of stuff that gives us all pain. I would say that despanning, a word that gets often used is consolidating.
Okay.
It has other meanings too, but that one often gets used in these sort of scenarios. The thing about red, I guess it's about storage volumes, that maybe you would take the red stuff if you were able to store it. But I know in formats like red, they're quite analogous to film negatives, really, and that there's more goodness in the red file than there is in when somebody flattens it out to a ProRes or something. There's more dynamic range and potentially more resolution and things like that there. So it's good when you say the producers make that conversion for you, because there's artistic decisions about colorimetry and things when they do that. So I've often been in a situation where I have the red file in my hand and somebody wants to make a viewing copy, and then you do have to decide what color it should be and all those sort of things. So where possible, I've always tried to keep the reds. Like film negative, you put them away, you accept they're really hard to work with. It's going to be expensive if you ever need to use them, but we've got them for when somebody wants to do a big remaster or something. But it's just about storage, I suppose, as to whether you could keep
and I
those.
guess a lot of it is, too, about your audience and the needs, right? All of this, of course, is so dependent on that. I'm trying to kind of think in a way that we don't have to depend on that for every single instance, because then we can't make policies and plans moving forward to deal with scale. So some kind of models. But yeah, I think for us, at least the system I'm on and where I'm working and how the structure of being so access-oriented works, if someone came to me and said that, we'd probably make an exception, but I think, just the nature of our delivery channels too, a lot of that stuff's going to go to like Smithsonian Channel and not us, it's just the kind of level of quality, not quality. We see a lot of like prosumer or consumer products, less the high end, but that's just the nature of the organization and the products that I have that people work with.
Yeah, personally, in my current job, we've got a few camera originals which I know archive, and there's a few occasions where they're historically significant and the chain of custody or the authenticity matters, and it's really nice to show that it hasn't been tampered with, and you can prove that with reference back to the original that was delivered, rather than sort of breaking that at some point throughout the way. Not in all cases, but it's just there's occasions when that's relevant.
I think that's a really important comment, though, about, especially as archivists, too. I don't want to say I'm a bad digital archivist, but, like, sometimes, because the tools really aren't there to help us consolidate, and maintain all of that data. We do it kind of manually. I know we sort of put a call out. Blake McDowell's here from African American History and Culture, brought a few of us together to kind of start to look at some of these and think about a tool we could use as archivists to help consolidate and maintain that original technical information, add some, administrative information, so be able to stabilize with minimal intervention and minimal loss. But without having to just say, so many times I just hear people say they're just leaving it for later. And then I see the scale that we're encountering and the growth, and it scares me. So we're trying to make a...
Yeah, there are some bits of goodness in some of those little sidecar files, the XMLs and things. And there are some tools out there to do reversible transfers as well. I know Kieran just mentioned something earlier. I know he's been involved in some of that before with me in some
that's
stuff,
a call out too, is making all of that much more apparent and aware for the community, I think, because we're just all learning.
I just kind of wanted to follow up on that. As you know, this is working in a production environment. This is something that I'm really intimately involved with, and I just kind of wanted to ask you, and I guess the room in general, about, so one of the things that I think has been a real challenge is finding those stable formats for born digital audiovisual materials. We've kind of solved those problems when it comes to analog digitized materials, but those formats that we can use for analog materials to kind of losslessly compress down from uncompressed video, balloon born digital files. And when you're talking about something like ProRes, it is quite lossy when you're going from a camera original. And I was just wondering if in your discussions, if in your work, or if anybody else had kind of thoughts about higher quality, stable formats that would be worth transcoding to without some of the loss that you see in going to ProRes.
Yeah. That should be the talk if I had an answer. I think I see so much AVC, and there's AVC intra, there's high quality, now lossless AVC. I don't know if I want to take, that's also what I think I'm saying, is I don't know if I want to take a compressed format, a natively compressed, and the other argument is turn it into what your evergreen format for digitizing, right? There's a wonderful lossless compressed, a lossless uncompressed format, FFV1, right, that we use for our digitizing. But to do that, you're just making 3 or 4 times larger files and then adding information that's not there, right? So why, that's not a solution, just because it's safe and we're used to that format. So I don't know. We were getting all ProRes before, so this is a better solution that's not going back to that, but it is still there's not one answer for me anyway of what it is. But I have seen though that when we embarked on this, we were like, oh, we're just going to encounter so many different formats, and they're going to grow and grow and grow, and we really don't. We see mostly a handful in various levels that that are differently increasing and various parameters inside, but not. There's now 2 responses happening.
Yeah. So,
maybe
is this an
maybe
immediate
you
follow-up,
guys can
Kieran?
answer that. Is there an answer?
Kieran, is that an immediate follow-up to the question?
Yes, and I have
If it can.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got a question here. Maybe we'll just come back to you, Kieran, in a second.
I'm also here all day if you want to talk to me.
Yeah.
Or if you want to know about the system more, I didn't talk about that, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll come back, Kieran.
This isn't that complex, hopefully, so I'll be short. First, thank you. It's fab to feel less alone when you're dealing with this stuff. To bounce further off what the 2 other lovely people have said, is there a centralized place where we can discuss and keep track of these kind of ethical decisions we're making when it comes to migrating file formats? Speaking for myself, I work in the film archive for Imperial War Museums, and there's times where we have to migrate things because the born digital file fails ingest, so we have to do something there, or we actually don't keep our raw files because we just don't have the infrastructure for it. And like you said, it's irresponsible to try and do that. We're in the petabytes of data, and we just can't do that. We're all making these really important decisions. Is there any way that we can all work together and say okay, we do this, maybe you can do this, or because sometimes it feels very isolating.
Yeah, we
and
need
you feel
a
bad for
Slack
doing
channel. Thank you. This is great. That's great. That's a great idea. I think that's the last sentence of my paper too. Is please, let's all do it together.
Let's make
We need a
mistakes together.
space to share all this research together and talk about it. Because you're right, it's not just the technical choices. It's the ethical choices we face as archivists and thinking about a future. And I think that's why a lot of us don't act. But yeah, I think great. Let's build a space. Yes. And if anybody knows of one, or where a good space would be.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Great. We'll go to Kieran at the back on the left-hand side. Yeah, maybe a decision tree.
Yeah,
For
decision
every
tree.
organisation has different
think-
decisions to make, but guidance about how you make the decisions might be.
I think we have a lot to learn from the art community too, software-based art, complex objects and ways in which, they have less stuff and more money, but sometimes. But I think some of those choices that they're making too.
it's kind of following on from the stable format thing. I remember in the Irish Film Institute, we kept the originals, and then we would also stream copy 1 or more cards, because with XDCAM-EX, it would sometimes span cards into a single Matroska file, and then make access copies from that. And I really regret doing that, because we just needed to keep the original, and we were never going to touch that Matroska file. And it got me thinking then in future about this kind of preemptive file format migrations that we don't always need to do, and that perhaps emulation plays some sort of a part here, that okay, P2 is quite complex, but there are tools existing right now to rewrap them and turn them into a single file and make them less complex. And I wonder if emulation does play a part where we can just preserve the originals right now, but then think about the environments that are needed to make these things accessible
Yeah,
and preserve
that's
those.
the other side of this argument, right? That I don't know. Yeah, it's a very good, choice. I think then we could have a whole talk about how we could improve our like file format identification tools so they don't just say there's 30 MTS files, right? So you have like better stats of your repository of like packaged how many AVCHD packages you have, things like that. That if we're gonna store them natively as is, that there's a better way to kind of report out on that with the tools that we use. But it's the opposite argument I'm making, but yeah, it's a really good idea.
Okay, we've got maybe time for 2 more questions. So we'll just go the nearest one first, and then we'll follow up with you again.
Thank you all for coming and asking questions.
I haven't got a question. But just for the room and for you, Crystal, and maybe if anyone is here from them, the Victoria and Albert Museum have a good white paper out about complex objects and preservation decision making. And I can't remember the name, unfortunately, so maybe someone is here that can help me on that. But yeah, it's a good one to look up, and I think you're right. There are things to learn from that community. The Victoria and Albert Museum, that was.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, we're a little, I think the archival community and the video production community is a bit different because of the scale. I mean, the scale is my problem, and why I make some of those choices. And then the communities that we're serving, right? And how they need different points of access. So I don't know. But I think we have a lot to learn, so thank you.
And this was again a pointer rather than a question, but it may not be appropriate for everybody, but there's a tool called Raw Cooked. It's, you're probably aware of this then. It was mainly developed by Jerome Martinez that was demonstrating Media Info yesterday that I'm sure a lot of people use. And it's about doing a lossless transform of raw camera originals into a format that's a package but is usable while it's in that package form. So you can play it in VLC, you can transcode it with FFmpeg, but it's entirely bit reversible back to what was in the original. It's not appropriate for everybody. I have to say I was very interested about it but never used it in my previous job. But there's some concepts in there, and there's a lot of research and analysis that's actually quite reusable in there as well if you're not using the tool itself. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think maybe we need a tool like for AVCHD, a cooked AVCHD. Maybe we could cook, maybe instead of consolidate, we call it cooked. No,
Yeah,
I don't want to steal the cooked term, but yeah. I think, I think, making sense of the complex object in the way that it's put together uniquely for itself, but also, not accurate when you just look at it on the files share or as files, right? Again, that's like, what is original order, right? What does that mean for objects like this? Thank you all so much.
Thank you. And if we could just have another round of applause for all 3, that'd be great.